innovation. It can be born out of a single spark.
Mr. Watson, come here.
And this spark has spread to change our lives forever.
AT&T.
Connecting us instantaneously through the stars high above.
This satellite is bound to increase the well-being and security of all people.
Today, that spark is continuing to spread, transforming not only our communication, but our knowledge, entertainment, and emotions. Through groundbreaking innovation, AT&T is leading the way, bringing us all closer together. 51 years after Alexander Graham Bell's first phone call, there was another spark. 4 brothers from Ohio discovering a new kind of magic, a way to bring sound to picture.
Wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet.
It was the beginning of a new era, and it would lift the Warner Brothers studio to the forefront of their emerging industry. Though it was also just the start of the legacy of one of the most successful motion picture and television studios in the world. Become who you were born to be. A legacy that's embodied the power of mass entertainment and captured our imaginations, all while bringing our fantasies and realities closer together than ever before. When the next revolution began, in our own living rooms, the most successful innovators understood how the rules had changed and how many opportunities had been born.
Now here's the news.
We're all preparing to get out. We hear sounds of something overhead.
And in the decades since, Turner has continued to reinvent television every step of the way, entertaining us, informing us,
We do have breaking news.
and inspiring us.
Turner Broadcasting is a positive force in a world where cynics abound.
I've been here almost 20 years, man. It's a testament to how close we are as a family.
Hey, I'll show you how to spar with Kevin Hart.
Of course, if transformation is born out of a willingness to take risks, the biggest risks can yield the most magnificent rewards. Shaping culture,
The game is out there, and it's either play or get played.
driving conversation,
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.
and stirring our hearts and minds in ways that stay with us long after the screen cuts to black.
Let's give the people what they want.
Okay, that's really
I'm sorry, that was too
way
much.
out of line.
That's the legacy of HBO, redefining the very face of entertainment over and over again. 4 iconic and indelible visions. These are the foundation of Warner Media. These are the lights that have been defining the future for 130 years. Here we go. The future of how we connect. How we communicate. How we tell our stories. Now, here they are, together, set once again to change everything.
That's the new AT&T, man. Yeah.
A lot of corporate communications departments could take a clue from that. couldn't they?
I told Scott that's the best part of owning a media company. You get that kind of sizzle reel now.
Well, thank you for being here, Randall. It's a great honor that you'd come and spend the day with us here in Little Rock, and we appreciate it. And it's never easy, so thank you for being here. I think the questions and the dialogue I'd like to have with you today, we're going to end up maybe with where the sizzle reel left off. Could we back up just a little bit, though?
Sure.
So tell the folks a little bit. So you're from Moore, Oklahoma. They may think you've dropped in from, who knows where. You're from Moore, Oklahoma, and you have been married to your wife that you met where?
I met her in Moore, Oklahoma, and we've been married. I've been with AT&T 37 years. That's how I keep track of how long I've been married. I've been married for 37 years. And I asked her to marry me, and she said, I will, but you got to get a job. And so I got a job with Southwestern Bell Telephone.
How old were you guys when you met?
14.
I love that.
Yeah.
And what business did you grow up around?
My dad was in the cattle business, and which is exactly why my academic career began exactly where you would have thought it would begin, as an animal husbandry major. Right. People always laugh at that. I don't know why it's so funny.
He said somebody asked him about being in the cattle business and about when the lottery opened in Oklahoma. There was something about that.
I was with my dad. I worked for him while I was growing up, and they were talking about bringing a lottery into Oklahoma, and somebody asked my dad, if you happened to win the lottery, Gary, what would you do with the money? He said, well, I'd put it in the cattle business till it was all gone too. And so that's how we grew up.
Some businesses we just love and should shed. Oh, that's great. So you switched over to accounting somewhere along the way.
I did. Everybody's eating, so I'll be cautious with this story. But when you're in animal husbandry, you study. Many of you, I see some young people back here. You've studied AI. Who has studied AI in here? It's not artificial intelligence when you're in animal husbandry. That means artificial insemination. And so when I'm in Silicon Valley, and I told them I studied AI long before you did, they think I'm crazy. But
fell flat, didn't it?
I had to take an accounting class to get an animal husbandry major, and this is an important lesson for AT&T people here, you supervise folks, to realize. I took this accounting class, and I'm in there, it's August, and the accounting professor, Bud Lacey, is handing out exams. And he hands me an exam. He said, you need to come see me as soon as class is over. And I was in a hurry because I had to get to my AI lab that I was headed to. And so I go to see him, and he said, listen, young fella, I've given out 2 100s in accounting since I've been doing this, and you've gotten both of them. You may have some skill and aptitude here that you're not aware of. You ought to think about whether this could be a profession. And I remember thinking, people can make money doing this?
You don't get hot, you don't get sweaty.
And I go out to my AI lab. It was 105 degrees, and I was in a very unfortunate situation with a mama cow, and Bud's words kept going through my mind, and one thing led to another, and soon I was an accounting major.
I love it. So were you AT&T right out of school? I know you went back to school, you got a master's.
Before I got out of school, I asked my wife to marry me, and she said, yeah, if you get a job. And so I got a job with Southwestern Bell Telephone the old-fashioned way. My brother got me on, and he got me a job I worked in the computer room, and I'll never forget my first job was working late nights, mounting 19-inch reel tapes on tape drives. And I'd literally, for 12 hours a night, I'd look at a computer screen, it would say mount tape 3Q1432 on drive 4, and I'd go find that tape, I'd put it on this drive, and I'd push load, start, and then I'd go get the next one. I did that for 12 hours a night for a long time going through school. I was good at it. And by the way, if you put the wrong tape on the wrong drive, it said wrong tape on the wrong drive, so you really couldn't screw it up.
A little foolproofness helps.
Yeah.
So then you ended up in St. Louis, and you ended up in the accounting area, and then somewhere along the way, some group of people took an interest in it.
Yeah, actually, you know what? When I was doing that job in the computer room, I graduated from school, and I accepted a job with Arthur Andersen in Dallas, Texas, and I handed in my resignation. And I never forget, it was a late night shift that I was working, so it was Monday morning. I'd worked all weekend, And I'm just dead asleep, and the phone rings. Randall, yes, this is Bob Schoonmaker. I didn't know who Bob Schoonmaker was. Another important lesson for you guys at AT&T over here. But Bob said, Randall, I understand. He said, you know who I am? I said, no, sir, who are you? He said, I'm the CFO of Southwestern Bell. And I said, okay, now I'm trying to get my bearings about me. And he said, listen, before you leave us, I understand you're quitting us. Before you leave us, could I get you to come see me? And I said, where are you located? He said, St. Louis. I said, well, sir, I'm glad to do it. Keep in mind, we were broke at this time. I said, I'm glad to come see you, but who's paying for the trip?
You don't ask if you don't get it. You don't get it, you don't ask.
That's right. He said, if you'll come, I'll pay. And I remember going up to see him. All the divestiture of AT&T had just happened. And so we had all these, Southwestern Bell was like a startup company. We were a $12 billion business, and we had no professional staffs. AT&T used to do all that stuff. So they were building new accounting and tax staffs, and so he offered me a job doing that, making $41,000 a year. Arthur Anderson was going to pay me $28,500. I remember leaving there, going to a pay phone before wireless phones, and calling my wife and said, sweetheart, we are rich.
Oh, mercy. You can't make these up.
You can't make it
now,
up.
Your peer growing up at the same time, Stan Sigmund, who ran my great friend that ran the wireless business for years, he started as a janitor in the switch room in somewhere in West Texas, Hereford, Texas.
Hereford, Texas. And my predecessor, Ed Whitaker, started out as a lineman doing cable throws. So yeah, it's common in our company for people to come up that way.
It's a great story about what can be.
Right.
So the mentorship that you got, so you didn't go straight from animal husbandry to accounting and figure out what you know now. Somebody along the way invested in you. What did that look like?
Oh, there were so many of them, Scott. You would know this as well as anybody because I know your story. But it just seems like every place you would land, there would be somebody who would invest themselves in you. And I was actually quite fortunate. Early in my career, I was asked if I would move to Mexico. And we had bought an operation there, and I was asked if I'd go up there and help run that operation. And Ed Whitaker, my predecessor, I was peon in the organization when this really happened, way down. He met me and took a notice of me and actually began to spend time with me. And when I got to Mexico, he put me under a guy named Carlos Slim. You probably have heard of this guy.
The wealthiest guy in the world?
Yeah,
Carlos
that
Slim?
guy. And he also, for whatever reason, took a liking. We really developed a rapport and a relationship. And these people, just over the years, they were the kind of people who, you need these people in your life. When you do something really dumb or have a really dumb idea, they say that was really dumb or that was a dumb idea. But then tell you how they would have processed it. And they just would invest time with me and help me think through issues and take me and put me in areas. I always used to say Ed Whitaker deliberately used to put me in places where he thought I would fail. And because, man, I just think nothing teaches you like failure. And I'll never forget animal husbandry, accounting, tax, finance, and he makes me the head of marketing one time, right? And I did have some failures in there, but you learned a lot, and you learn quickly when you go through that kind of process.
When I went on the board with you 6-8 years ago, I was talking to Joe when I came back, and he said, it's a public company, we won't talk about it, but what was your impression? And I said, exact same set of issues. I mean, word for word, the exact same, but 3 more zeros on the end of every single number. There was a couple of other things, though, and one of them that really, and we'll deal with one in a minute, but one of them that really made an impression on me was how you reinvested in technology, the challenges that technology created. They created great opportunities, and they created challenges for your workforce. And AT&T's investment in their workforce and the way you systematically and thoughtfully championed that and stayed at that, tell folks just a little bit about where that came from, because I had never seen anything like that.
Yeah, so this started about 2011, I think it was. And we were looking at where the world was going. And as you think about, you hear software is eating the world. Well, in our business, everything we do is going from being hardware-centric to software-centric. And so the very nature of work within our business was changing, and it was changing radically. And John Stanky, who is our chief operating officer, I brought him over to help me with some strategic issues. And he and I were talking about this, and we were looking at how the very nature of our workforce had to change in a very compressed period of time. And the more we began to kind of look at this and push this, the more it began to hit us that, we do logistics really well. That's what companies like ours and yours, when you were running Altel, you're logistics companies. And if we have to build a nationwide LTE or 5G network, we know how to do that. I mean, you put plans together, you put capital allocation plans together, you develop people for certain things, and you go and you build it. It occurred to us that we were going to have to basically reskill an entire workforce in a 6-7 year period of time if we were going to succeed. And how you did that was a daunting task. And so we took a look at how you might go about reskilling hundreds of thousands of people and began to look at technological solutions. We brought in this guy, Sebastian Thrun, a Silicon Valley guy who had a company called Udacity. Some of you may have heard of him. And we began aggressively working with universities, Georgia Tech being one of the first, and I give them a lot of credit to give us a fully accredited master's of computer science degree that is purely digital and virtual. No presence ever required. And it's the same degree, a $40,000 degree you go to Georgia Tech to get. You could get online from Georgia Tech for $6,000. We worked with them, we got it accredited, and we pick our head up today, and there have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 million of these courses completed. And we have had a workforce that it's truly being transformed. And of all the things I reflect back on in terms of things that have been accomplished over the last 12 years, that's what I look at and go, man, that has worked. It has paid dividends. It's paid dividends for our people. It's paid dividends, obviously, for our shareholders and the company. And one day I'm going to take this on. It may be when I retire. I think that is a model. I think that is a model that would work within our government. I mean, think about a city, the ability to use technology to reskill workforces for the work of the future. And there's something here that I think is really important.
It is a fantastic program. There's reams of information behind it and depth of thought that's behind it. But if you're willing to share it, I bet there are governments around that can benefit from that. So as you talked about being a logistics business and building networks, the other thing that I had never seen, never heard of, never thought of when I landed at AT&T's board was the way that you had cobbled together spectrum. John Stanky, I think, was doing this for you at the time. He got spectrum that had been fallow or locked up in some of these corporate shenanigans for 15 and 20 years, and he meticulously unraveled them, put them together, and then you did this program called FirstNet that I don't think anybody else in the industry recognized what it really could be. Tell folks a little bit about FirstNet and how it specifically might apply in this state to bring it all the way home.
Sure. This industry that Scott and I have spent so much time in, it's kind of strange because if you're going to be relevant and viable in this industry, especially in a world where you're not just having people stream the internet on these devices, but now they're streaming the stuff you saw on the screen, full-length motion pictures, and that requires an amazing amount of capacity in these networks. Capacity in the wireless business is this stuff he talked about, spectrum. Wireless licenses to wireless airwaves, and this stuff is gold, and we spend our lives in the wireless business figuring out how to piece together a footprint and a portfolio of these airwaves to accommodate all of these volumes that you want to dump on it. And so we have spent, since Scott came on my board, it's been one of the primary focuses, getting ourselves ready for the world that you saw in this video, of streaming video, massive amounts of video to wireless devices. And Scott was there beside me as we were going through and doing this. And so over, a few years, literally the last 6-7 years, we've spent $22 billion on getting licenses for these airwaves. Now, that's great. You spent $22 billion. To put it to work, you literally have to send somebody up every cell tower in America to put up equipment to make those airwaves useful. Scott asked about FirstNet. And I'll come back to this, but it's really important, this FirstNet thing. As a result of the disaster of 9/11, Congress passed a bill that required the government to build a nationwide wireless network for our first responder community. Because after 9/11, as you recall, everybody showed up for this emergency and nobody could talk to each other. The networks were either down or they weren't interoperable. People couldn't communicate. The fire department came from New Jersey. They couldn't communicate with the fire department in New York. It was just a disaster. And so the government was instructed to put this together, and they said, here is a piece of this spectrum, premium spectrum, that whoever builds this network uses this spectrum. So they put out a big bid, and the board and I said, that's an important thing for the United States of America. This was in 2016, and we think it's important that we do this. AT&T ought to be the one to do this, and we went after it with a passion. We bid, it was a $40 billion bid, and we won it. Now, why is this important? Because to put this first responder network together, what do you got to do? We got to go climb every cell tower in America. And so we're building out this network for the first responder community. We're 75% complete. While we're up there on those cell towers, this spectrum, this $22 billion of licensed airways we've been accumulating, we're turning all that up while we're up. And by the way, we're making all of that available for the first responder community as well. Also, while we're up there on those cell towers, we're doing one other thing. We're putting 5G equipment in place, 5th generation wireless technology. So we're climbing the cell site once and accomplishing 3 very, very important things. And what you're seeing is as we turn all this up, the AT&T network has just exploded in terms of the performance, the capacity, its capability. And today we have 10,000 agencies around the United States that are on the first responder network. One of the first states in the United States to opt in was this state, Arkansas. I have a very soft spot in my heart for Arkansas. And by the way, there are requirements when we build this network that we reach rural America. And so rural America, we're doing a lot of cell site builds into rural America. The technology is fast enough that this can be broadband. So it's the opportunity to get broadband out to rural America, which we think is very important. And we have now a path to 5G. So as a result, mid-year 2020, we will have a nationwide footprint of 5G in the United States.
Now let's stop there for just a second. The 2G, or analog to digital, was a big change.
Big.
So when we went to 3G, it was what, 30, 40% faster, 30, 40%? When we went from 3G to 4G, again, it was 30, 40% increase. When we go from 4G to 5G, that's a radically different thing than the incremental experience people have had before.
So what happens with 5G? Yes, it's faster. That's what everybody goes to immediately. It's faster. Yes, it's faster. But it's more than just fast, because this is step change technological advancement. It's faster, and I always say no latency. That's not accurate. But when it's very low latency, we're talking 10 millisecond latency. What does that mean? Think about it in terms of a smartphone. You hit an app and initiate a command on a smartphone, sub 10 millisecond latency, it's instantaneous. You're looking at the first opportunity to have instantaneous connectivity. And you can imagine, let your mind go where that takes you in terms of new services and capabilities. But that's just a part of it. In a 4G world, you see a typical cell tower. You can connect simultaneously thousands of devices to a single cell tower. So a watch, a smartphone, I'm in a car that's connected. There are businesses that are connected. You can connect hundreds of thousands of devices to one of those towers. Go to 5G. Hundreds of thousands becomes millions. Millions of simultaneous connections. And not only millions of simultaneous connections, but the ability to do security like we haven't conceived of before. So this device, it has been beeping on me. I'm going to turn it off. This device, if I happen to lose it, I can do a locate on it. I can locate this device within a few meters. I mean, that's pretty darn good. In a world of 5G, you can begin to locate anything that's connected to that network within a couple of centimeters. Now think about what that means for security and identifying where you are, where a device is, or a particular device is. And then here comes the really important part. When you have this kind of speed, no latency, you begin to think differently about the entire architecture of what kind of services you design. So this device is kind of large. It can be a little bulky. Why? There's a lot of computing power, a lot of processing power, a lot of storage power inside this device. Once you have a network this sophisticated and advanced, all of that compute, all that storage moves out of here back into the network. And once you move all of that out of here back into the network, you begin to think of form factor very differently. You don't need a big bulky device like this. Google had it right. You begin to think of devices that look like this. You begin to think of devices that have low power, very, very miniaturized devices that you can put for traffic management. This becomes the platform for everything from pipelines to utilities. Autonomous cars do not happen without a world of 5G. And so it becomes a very pervasively connected world at a level that, even guys that we live and breathe this stuff all the time, we haven't conceived of until the last couple of years in terms of where this takes you. And it explains, Scott, why the board and I, we spend so much time, and you hear our government talking so much about 5G and security issues, these Chinese companies. You think about everything in this society that's going to be operating on a world of a 5G platform. I think it's a very relevant and important question in terms of who do you want underlying that technology? Do you want Chinese companies underlying that technology? Maybe, but I think it's a question we ought to debate as society. And so I actually, that's one of the areas where I tell the administration, I think you're right. This ought to be a very public debate about this.
There have been other areas where you told them you thought they were wrong.
Yes, there have been.
So as we turn to, if the 5G network that allows millions of devices and has a throughput speed, then as you love to say, I've never gotten a data forecast right. I've always been under. It is always overperformed. As you start to think about the dense network requirements that video puts on a network, when you go from 4G to 5G, what once was impossible becomes somewhat standard fare.
Expectation.
So you no longer have to have a coaxial cable or a fiber cable to get 100 megabits into a home. In the next little bit, you're going to be able to do that through a wireless device? Is that at play here?
Yes. These things, they always take longer than people think, but when they happen, they always go bigger than people expected. You know what I'm saying? And I always have to remind people, when the iPhone first came out, our engineers used to say there's no way the internet truly moves to mobile because there's not enough capacity. I remember we used to say that about voice. Voice communication will never go purely mobile because there's just not enough capacity. Well, voice is mobile. The internet is now mobile. People said there's no way video goes mobile. There's just not enough capacity. Well, 4G comes along and video is mobile. Now, can mobile wireless technology ever replace what you think of as fixed broadband today, your cable service that goes into your home? Folks, it will happen. It's not going to happen in the next couple of years at scale, but it is inevitable. And we have in our offices today in Dallas 5G turned up, and with a 5G device in our offices, it's not a full network right now, but without a full network, I'm getting 2 gig speeds at our offices in Dallas on a mobile device. You're not getting 2 gig on any cable modem or any kind of cable service around the United States of America right now.
You'd be doing good to get 50 meg.
Exactly. And so this does, over time, become the standardized platform, I believe, for broadband. Fiber feeds these networks. You still have to have fiber and so forth, but it will be a mobile, wireless-centric environment.
So the infrastructure to allow video to come through your handset at a gig is going to allow then your handset to connect to any smart TV that you want to connect it to. So if you want to have a TV that's a wall or a TV this size, you don't have to have anything plugged into the back of it. You just have to have a wireless phone that you can flip up to the screen. Could it be that simple?
Actually, it'd probably be more simple than that. There will just be there's a chip in here that allows it to receive a wireless signal and an antenna. That screen will have a chip and a wireless antenna in it. And so that will just be your internet connection. Whatever you think of, whatever's connected to the internet today, everybody in this room probably has a TV that's connected to the internet. It's connected through your cable or your AT&T fiber or your AT&T service. It will be just as easy and standardized to connect it to your AT&T 5G service.
So how does that lead you to think about the delivery of content when the mechanism that content is delivered through is about to go through a step function, once-in-a-lifetime generational change?
So delivery of content, distribution of content, you all know this, and anybody that's under 70 years old, or maybe probably anybody that's under 80 years old now, appreciates that the way you get your video and entertainment has radically changed in the last 5 years. Netflix has changed the world. And if you're a media company, and we now are a media company, everybody in media is saying, oh my, if I'm relying on old forms of distributing my media through, if you're Warner Brothers, if you're Disney, if you're Fox Studios, you create all this great media. How do you get it to the customer? Everybody either delivers it through a theater, through a cable service, or through a satellite service. If that's your basis for distributing all this great media you're creating, you don't have a very rosy future. And everybody is trying to figure out, how do I get my content directly to the consumer without going through a cable, satellite, or a movie theater? And so you've heard of Disney Plus, right? That's all Disney Plus is. It's saying, Disney's saying, how can I get my content directly to the consumer without going through a cable or satellite company? HBO Max, which you saw pitched up here on the screen a moment ago. We bought Warner Media, what was Time Warner, now Warner Media, and we said, we are uniquely positioned to take all that amazing content you saw profiled up there, HBO, the Warner Brothers library, Turner Networks. We are uniquely positioned to take that content directly to the consumer. We have, between all of the connections here, all of our pay TV businesses, we have 170 million, our broadband connections, 170 million customer connections. And so we're standing up this business, HBO Max, and the objective is to take it directly to the consumer through all of these various connections that we have with the consumer. We think we're uniquely positioned to do that. We'll be launching that in May of 2020. We've introduced it to the world in a big conference that we had last month in LA, down in Burbank. And we're really, really excited about this. We think it's going to change how people view media.
So John Stanky, the guy that was working through the spectrum issues when we started this 8 years ago, he's now gone from there through the wireline network and the group that launched FirstNet over to Warner Media. Tell us a little bit about him, and then I want to come back to some of the issues that not everybody has seen the world the same way that we've seen it. I'd like you to talk about some of what you've learned through the issues that we've had with our shareholder guests that want to say, well, you can do it this way or that way. Just walk us through kind of how you see that playing out.
So John Stanky is our Chief Operating Officer, and this guy's a really unique individual. I tell people that if you wanted somebody to run a large-scale communications business, which is what AT&T is, John Stanky has to be on your short list to run it because he has been side by side with me building this business that we've created over the last few years. But we also now have one of the largest scale media businesses in the world, Warner Media, Warner Brothers Studios, HBO, and Turner. John Stanky has spent the last 2 years while we've been fighting the government to get the deal approved in the middle of this business. And
taxpayer waste, sorry. I don't know what came out.
And he is now running Warner Media, and he has reconfigured that business in a way that's allowing us to bring all that content directly to market. He now knows the media business from a very unique perspective, I would suggest to you, and he's distinguishing himself in that way. And so when we're looking for a chief operating officer, I said, all right, I can find somebody to run a communications company. I could probably go out and find somebody to run a media company, although a media company of the future is not a media company of today. It's very different. You got to figure out how to get directly to the consumer. Somebody to run all of that, as a chief operating officer, there's probably 3 or 4 people in the world that you entertain to do that kind of job. John has stepped up and is assumed the role of COO, putting these two businesses together. He's doing an amazing job. And, the company we bought, this is a really important point, was 3 companies. We keep saying it over. Warner Brothers, which is a movie production studio. It's one of the largest scaled production studios in the world. Make movies, I mean, you saw all the content in the movies they make up there. It is absolutely the largest TV production studio in the world. They develop 131 TV series every year. Everything from Big Bang Theory to a lot of what you see on HBO, but 131 of them a year. That is a self-contained company. When we bought Time Warner, that was a self-contained company. HBO, you know HBO. Turner Networks, CNN, TBS, TNT, sports programming, news, etc. To make this strategy come together, we had to take 3 companies that have been run totally independently for decades, tear down the silos and say we're going to have to bring one product to market. If it were easy, it would have probably been done 10, 15 years ago, right? We brought John in and said we're going to have to tear these walls down. This is another management exercise for you people to take note of. Took courage, took a lot of intestinal fortitude, took a lot of spears. Because doing this in the media world, I've learned that what might seem like a small issue in the world of communications, the world of media, it makes front page news all over the place.
I knew that when they asked the question, who dresses him? And I said, what do you mean? Can't dress himself?
That was actually asked
what they meant.
in a publication. But he tore those silos down. But for tearing those silos down, you could have never talked about bringing to market what he's bringing to market here. And he's bringing to market something, I'm just telling you, come May, there is nobody in this room, demographic, whether you're female, male, young, kid, millennial, older, this is going to be one of the most significant portfolios of content that somebody can pick up anywhere. And he's pulled all that together in a remarkably short period of time and done an amazing job.
I'm a huge fan. Yeah. So you've talked about the technology changes. We've talked about the business model changes. We talked about the personnel and some of the key leadership and technical evolution you've had to make in the firm to be able to deliver this. We have spent as a firm between Spectrum, CapEx, forget the transactions, $100 billion over the last 5 or 6 years bringing this to life.
140 plus.
140 billion. Are you still the largest investor in the United States?
In the United States of America, I'm pretty sure we are.
So, and no good deed shall go unpunished. No one's ever going to agree with everything. But what you've led, and this is why I'm a huge fan of yours and John's and your teams, what you have led has been a transition that took a corporate courage that, frankly, I have never seen. Because you were going to take shots for this, because you're going after the cable business, you're going after the distribution business, you're going after the way that the gatekeepers make their money in Hollywood. That's not likely to result in a lot of positive what do we say? Feedback loops. But you've stayed true to it and you've delivered on it. And as you look out over the next, we'll wrap this up. As you look out over the next 3 or 4 years, and you've been in the trenches with people that have argued back and forth in every direction, both internally and externally, how do you see this actually translating into the business impact, the stock price, the customer experience? How do you see that playing out over the next 3 or 4 years?
If executed according to plan, and I'm gaining a lot of conviction around this plan. You can now begin to see it, you can touch it, you can feel it. You know, this product that you've seen, you may ask, why are you so hung up on that? Because we believe this product, if we can create this direct-to-consumer product for people to consume their media, their entertainment, their sports, and their news. This is a product that, in terms of the United States alone, we think rather than our typical services like mobile, if you're doing really good in a market like Arkansas, we don't talk market shares, but you're doing really good, you're getting 40% share. I mean, that's really good. It's, you're typically a third of the market, and so forth. This product we're talking about is something that we believe you can penetrate 60 million homes in the United States in a fairly short period of time. That suddenly becomes very interesting because not only are you penetrating 60 million homes in the United States with a great media presence, but all of a sudden you could begin to, rather than say, if you buy our wireless, we'd like to sell you media, No, if you say, if you're on our media, it makes a lot more sense if you were connected via AT&T. And now you're going through 60 million homes, talking about 5G connectivity that is truly unique. You're beginning to talk about fiber connectivity into the home that is truly unique. And you begin to think of a relationship that starts from 60 million homes rather than a relationship that starts from 30 million homes. And it changes how you conceive of the services that you deliver. People are they're buying a media presence with connectivity that's embedded in it. And by the way, once you have this kind of customer relationship, 60 million homes, you have unique insights into those homes. And I honestly believe that as much as we like to think the world of advertising is going away, if you took advertising out of the media world, Walter Hussman could attest to this as much as anybody. You cannot continue to produce the amount of media that we produce without advertising-supported models. And we have amazing amount of insights in terms of how people use these devices, what they're viewing, where they are when they're viewing it. We never use it about Walter. We don't ever say, what's Walter watching? But what do people in certain demographics watch and so forth? And now all of a sudden you have a different advertising model that you can begin to deliver very tailored advertising for advertisers to people. And we've invested heavily in this advertising technology, and you put all of this together, and you have a very different business than what we have conceived of in the past. You have a business that starts from media and entering the home through a world of media and then driving through connectivity and advertising models, and it becomes a very exciting business.
It sure does. And I noticed that while you've been in Arkansas, your stock price is up about 1%. So we'd like to have you back.
Closer
anytime.
to 2%.
Okay, good. Thanks so much. We appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.